two big changes just yesterday into telemarketing. The first,
every time they make these changes or say that they're changing, doing something different, it's almost always right before they do a lot of, I had sales calls that went back as long as you wanted. We ended up having to turn over 16,000 sales calls.
amendment in December of 2023 about the FCC saying, no, can't do that anymore. It has to.
What if I got hacked? There is a rule that if you take the order over the phone, which a lot of salespeople do, they say, hey, okay, and they input the, then Greg told me there's a separate law that states, isn't that kind of unfair though? I mean, if you make a rule change, shouldn't the companies be allowed to adjust? But like you make the change and then you go after someone who's been breaking that rule in the time frame that the rule didn't exist. Welcome back to yet another episode of Don't Say That. Now, the regulations are constantly changing. There's a lot going on all the time, and that's actually part of the trick. Is it's up to you to keep up, because not knowing is not a defense. And take that from personal experience. You can't say that. So today, Greg and I thought we'd shift gears a little bit, and we talk about what's going on in the recent times. Now, we're filming this episode about a week and a half before it comes out. So in that week and a half, if there's been any new changes, it won't be reflected in this episode. But we've also, if you think about it, we started this podcast about 3 months ago. And in that time, we haven't really done an episode where we just say, what's new? And in those 3 months, there's a lot that's new. Not necessarily only FTC related, but other laws and things that definitely impact business owners, which is what you are. So let's get into it. Greg and I were just about to talk about this. Greg, you sent me a text message yesterday. It's funny because I didn't reply to it. My bad. It's just legal gobbity goobity boo. And I'm like, what is this? And so I put it away. And so, of course, right before we start the podcast, Greg's like, it's pretty important. And I'm like,
pretty important,
but I don't get it. So take it away, Greg. What is this?
Let me go through and let's backtrack, right?
Okay.
So for years and years and years, marketers have said, well, Section 5 of the FTC Act only pertains to B2C transactions.
Yeah.
Be business to consumer transactions. So I'm only selling to businesses. So I'm only going to focus on, I'm not going to concern myself with this. And I've been saying for years, no, they've had statements. A year ago, they came out and they said, we're going to look at earnings claims that pertains to B2B transactions as if it's a B2C transaction. So there's little nuggets that have happened over the last years. Now, we've talked on other episodes the importance of telemarketing practices, specifically in context of the telemarketing sales rule. Well, yesterday, the FTC enters into a change to the TSR, the telemarketing sales rule. And they come out and they say, guess what, everybody? We've been talking about this for a long time. Before our final rule announcement that happened yesterday, there was a presumed exemption under the TSR that exempted business-to-business transactions and calls. Guess what? No more. We got rid of it. The exemption is gone. So other than selling office and cleaning supplies, which is considered, the commission considers to be the most significant business problem area, at the time the final rule announced yesterday was that the TSR now expands to business transactions over the phone, which opens it up. So all of you that said, well, I can listen to this, but I really don't need to apply this for my telemarketing sales because I really only sell to businesses. No, they just amended that yesterday. They got rid of that exemption. So everything that we've been preaching, and in my philosophy, and Annika and I have talked about this before, there's a lot of you that are out there that are marketers. You have a funnel. The initial product offering is a small product offering that gets the client in the business. And then 6 months later, they're your business to business transaction. And the FTC doesn't look at it like that. They think of people who are established in an industry, they've engaged in that business for a long time, and then it could be a business to business transaction. But it doesn't matter anymore. Yesterday, they amended the TSR to include business to business transactions. The second thing they did is also a big one, because it pertains to some of the concepts we talk about retaining call recordings for telemarketing calls and documents and record keeping. So the second big rule that they said is that they want the TSR requirements for keeping documents to be in line with the do not call registry, which is the TCPA. Okay. So under the TCPA, which is the Telephone Consumer Protection Act, there's a requirement that when you're doing a sales solicitation over the phone and you get an authorization over the phone to process a credit card, you need to keep those call recordings for up to 2 years. If you're taking credit card information, inputting it into a system and hitting pay to get paid, you need to keep that portion of the call for 2 years. The TSR didn't have any such rule or regulation about record keeping. So when it came to the FTC trying to get compliance for that principle, they didn't have any teeth in it. The FCC could try to bring in action, but the FTC could not. Well, as of yesterday, they amended the rule to align the do not call registry, the TCPA, and the TSR, so that the same rules now apply to record keeping as it pertains to document retention of call recordings and everything else. Now, there are natural solutions. Don't take authorizations over the phone, and you don't have to keep call recordings. So, but what they're trying to do is merge all those laws so that they're all similar requirements across the board. So, two big changes just yesterday that into telemarketing. The first, now we have business to business transactions that can come under the scope of the TSR under Section 19, asset freezes, disgorging penalties and fees, and because of that, transactions not just to consumers but now to businesses. It's in the law now. The other thing is modification of record keeping so that it is in line with what the FCC does with the TCPA and the do not call registry. So two really big changes yesterday.
Yeah, really big. So the first one basically says even if you sell B2B, for example, now if you're talking to a business owner, this person runs $1 million a year company, saying what is your goal is an implied earnings claim now.
Yeah,
right?
I think it always was, but if you're in the you oversell, misrepresent your services, then they can come after you as a company for that violation as well.
Got it. So okay, so now it basically means businesses are included. B2B calls can just as well audited, and the rules easily flow over now. That's a pretty clear, like you're right, that's probably the loudest thing they've done so far to say we are not just B2C anymore.
Right.
And I want to tell everybody, I have noticed a trend just in the last couple of years that I've been tuned into the FTC. Every time they make these changes or say that they're doing something different, it's almost always right before they do a lot of enforcements.
Yeah.
Right? And so it's like they probably got a whole list of B2B companies that they want to go after because they're making this change.
Well, it's like the change the FCC did in December of last year when they came out and they modified with the rules on the TCPA for opt-ins for contacting individuals. So again, I think we talked about this in another episode, but basically on the 13th of December, the Federal Communications Commission and the federal government, they made a modification to the Telephone Consumer Protection Act and opt-ins on how you can communicate with consumers via text and telephone. And the big change for that was that they made it so that in the past, you could go and have an opt-in language that said, hey, by opting in and providing your phone and email and all that, you give us consents to contact you via telephone and text or automated systems. But in the past, you could say, you agree, client, to give us permission and our affiliates or partnered companies. Well, there were companies out there that were getting those opt-ins and then they were selling those data like Leadtree and others. And so it was this big gap that they were trying to fit in to get consents under the law, didn't apply to, state law because like California, Florida have many TCPAs. So they already had something in place to cover that. But for the rest of the United States, it was open. So the amendment in December of 2023 about the FCC saying, no, you can't do that anymore. It has to be company and named partner. So it'd be company and XYZ Corp. You're giving them authorization to do that because then the client knows at the beginning of the opt-in who they're giving consent to text and email. Although I do take this as an issue. This is a side note. I don't know if you're like me, but I get more spam texts now about the presidential campaign. I didn't opt into any of this, just so you know. Like somebody's
Politics is always excluded, though, right? They always exclude political campaigning.
yeah, sort of. Yeah, I mean, I know, but yeah, it's so
Oh, I
violated.
hate it. I mean, I
I haven't
absolutely hate
committed
it.
to it.
Yeah.
So anyway,
My favorite is messages I get from those who I did not support, whose opponents I supported, and they're
oh,
like,
for,
"Thanks for all the support you
yeah, I
sent
know.
us." You know, I'm like, "I didn't support you. Get me off your damn list."
Was rallying against you. So
Yeah.
to go back to the change with the FTC, that was a big change because now you can't just have an open-ended opt-in to get consumers' data to contact them via telephone and text for other partners that you're doing business with if you don't specifically
Oh,
state the business. Those are some big changes. And then we saw
no.
immediately, like what you said, they made that change on the 13th. In what, January 2nd or 3rd, the FTC sues Leadtree for the same
Yeah.
thing, for
Yeah.
getting the information and selling it to third parties.
Isn't that isn't that kind of unfair though? I mean, if you make a rule change, shouldn't the companies be allowed to adjust? But like you make the change and then you go after someone who's been breaking that rule in the time frame that the rule didn't exist. Kind of seems a
Uh,
little.
they sued him for other things too. It wasn't
Oh,
just.
okay, all right. Like you're like, oh,
I'm just
hey,
saying
and other
you're right
stuff.
though that they're probably sitting on another case right now where they're looking. I mean, you know this on it. When they
Yeah,
look at what do they look at you? Like they looked at your webinar from 4 years ago. Then
yeah,
oh, that drew the attention. Then they
yeah,
start going after everything else. So that's they
yeah.
probably
Well,
got like
they didn't even really know about my telesales calls, right? I don't think they had been on there and listened or recorded. That was discovered throughout the process. All right, so the first change I understand completely. It's in short, all the rules we've talked about, all the things that you can and cannot do, they apply now to B2B. You're not sitting free and clear. They can come after you. Number two was one I don't fully understand. So let me take another scenario. So what you basically said is, according to a specific rule, if you take the order on the phone, right? So let me back up even more, guys. Document retention policy is something that Greg and I have spoken about maybe lightly, but we talk a lot about like in the book and other things.
yeah.
Is you don't all this data, all this stuff. Like when what happened with me, okay, is when the FTC came, I had everything. I had everything from years. I had sales calls that went back as long as you wanted. We ended up having to turn over 16,000 sales calls. The other thing I realized is like, what if I got hacked? These calls, people talk about private stuff and their name and their information. I'm like, why do I even need a sales call that was done 3 years ago that did not result in a sale or anything? And so it's like that is covered under a data retention policy where you put an official policy with a lawyer together that says, hey, our company retains data and information for XYZ amount of time. So now, of course, as we were out there talking and training about how telesales is a heavily regulated thing, of course, marketers came and they were like, why don't I just not record them anymore? And I'm like, I guess. I don't really know. So we asked Greg, and there is a rule that if you take the order over the phone, which a lot of salespeople do, they say, hey, okay, and they input the. Then Greg told me there's a separate law that states that call has to be reserved, regardless of your data retention policy, has to be reserved for 2 years. It has to be kept because I guess they took the phone. So, but Greg, we had talked about how we could change the order process to not have to do with that, right? Whereas you could simply say, I'm sending you a link. Go, the contract is there, everything is there, go fill it out, go pay. And as long as you did not take the order on the phone, then that doesn't apply. Is that still, did I understand that correctly?
100%. So the rules are
Okay.
just all they're doing is uniforming the rules between the different acts to be the same. That's all they did.
Okay. So now what they're saying is, hey, we don't, but they don't still necessarily. So let's say a call where the order is not taken on the phone, where the transaction does not happen on the phone. What is the quote unquote requirement for that at the moment for retention? There's zero, right? But as an attorney, you still like to recommend that, hey guys, the right thing to do is retain it for 30
30
days, 60 days. Okay.
enough time
Got
to
it.
review the call so you can see what's being said. Because
Okay.
if you immediately delete it, I have a client that did that. He's just like, I'm not gonna help it. And then you know how they're like, just do, secret shoppers. Well, we only have like 6 sales guys. So after you've done that twice, they know who you are. And it's as
Yeah.
frustrating. So it's good to have at least 30, 60 days worth of stuff so you can review that, make sure that it's compliant because in certain states, consumers can record those calls. 23 states, they can actually record it. Well, it's called authorizing recordings. In 23 states, you can approve yourself to record. It's called a single way recording state. And in
Got
those,
it.
they could be recording the calls. So you got to make sure that your sales guys are saying the right things, are being compliant. We're not really getting rid of the the calls per se because they're bad. We're just not going to hold on to them forever, because if there's an issue and maybe you're like 99.9% compliant, but somebody says some dokey thing on one of those calls, you don't want to keep it forever.
Hmm.
So just get rid of it. We're not doing it to hide anything from the government. We're just doing it because we just don't want to hold on to stuff,
Yeah.
forever.
Well, it's
Because when
expensive too.
that's expensive, people are paying tons for storage costs and everything else.
Yeah.
So do it compliant, but then get rid of it.
Yeah.
Don't hold on to it.
Got it. All right, so two pretty big changes there. So if you are, so that's another tip is, by the way, after having spoken to Greg, and we used to take the orders on the phone a long time ago, so like years ago, but turns out we had changed the process anyways by default, by accident, and now I'm like, okay, if I sell anything on the phone, absolutely, you can stay on the phone and be like, hey, did you get it? Like, are you filling it out? Like, did you finish? Did you hit submit? But for that reason alone, I don't want to keep stuff around for 2 years, so. We changed that. Okay, what else is going on? I don't. The FTC did a AI conference slash meeting. They also just did one the other day about privacy.
Yeah.
Give us the lowdown on that. What's that been about?
So they actually came out with a press release this week too on AI. In January, they did what they called their tech summit, where they talk about artificial intelligence. They hosted this tech summit on the 25th of January. And in it, what they were worried about was the use of automated technology to deceive consumers. And one of the things they looked at was, and this pertains to a lot of different things. And I have clients that do webinars and they do short form videos and YouTube videos, and then they have telephone solicitations. And in those various mediums, they may have a video showing, and then they have like a voiceover, and it sounds like, right now, let's just be honest, because of the election, it could be Joe Biden or Donald Trump to draw attention to the offer, the underlying offer.
Hmm.
And it creates confusion onto who is promoting or endorsing or soliciting that offer, then the FTC is taking issue in that. So they issued a release this week about AI technologies as it pertains to confusion in videos and also in phone solicitations, where you pick up a call and you think you're talking to a live person. Either you think you're talking to a celebrity, Tom Hanks, Scarlett Johansson, or whatever else, or see an image, or you think that they are talking to a live person when it's an automated. So they are formatting new rules to address that, and it pertains to, in regards to telephone solicitations, whether you're talking to a live person or not, and that's disclosed when you're on the phone with them. And then two, whether or not they really don't love these voiceless or ringless voicemails because of the automated system of that. So there are many rules they're looking at on how to implement all of that. So yeah, the artificial intelligence technology summit. I mean, some of the highlights are that they're going to be focusing on artificial intelligence, which they did in the press release today or this week. Um, they're looking into inquiries into generative AI investments and partnerships, meaning they're going to scrutinize corporate partnerships and investments with AI providers, to make sure that it's transparent into who you're doing business with and who the end consumer is doing business with. So let me take that step back so I can say it in layman's terms. They're going to make sure that the clients you're engaging with know that they're dealing with a real person or company versus some artificial intelligence that they're not aware of. They're going to make sure that that's there. Because right now, like with chatbot and a lot of the AI stuff, they're just grabbing all this content and they're putting it together, making it seem like it's legitimate, it's not copyrighted, but they're finding a ton of errors with it. I think
Mm.
that it was just a thing that came out, I think last week, the week before, where a major AI, for a big, Fortune 500 company messed up and then sent a whole bunch of information out that was wrong. So
It's
they're
called
trying.
Google.
Yeah,
I'll
Google.
throw it out. Huh?
Yeah, there you go. I just was trying. You just said it. I was trying to be tactful. Okay.
Whatever. What are they gonna do? That was the craziest thing. That was when
I
there's
know.
no white people allowed in the
Yeah.
algorithm.
So, well, and
Um,
the other thing is monopoly. Because think about what the big, you said it, right? And the thing
yeah,
with Google, what they're really worried about is that you're going to get 4 to 5 tech firms that are going to monopolize this AI technology. I mean, you and I are doing AI with what we're doing with our stuff, and we're trying to do that, and that's other business owners are trying to. But really, when it comes down to it, if you've got all this millions of dollars or billions of dollars to put into this technology, and you're one of 4 players, you're going to be like AT&T back in the day. You're going to be the only player in town. So they're going to look at how how that's going to come into play as it pertains to monopolies and
yeah,
forcing competition and stuff. Because I mean, for a lot of you listening, you know that when you're doing marketing practices, Facebook, Instagram, they have a big, Google, they have a big control about the advertising market, and they
yeah,
can shut you off like that. And if it goes
yeah.
into the AI world and they're able to do that too, it's just going to harm the smaller players in the industry. So that's
Got it.
the type of things that they're looking at.
Okay, so that was the AI. So they didn't really come up with any specific rules. It's just more like, hey, we're looking, and so things.
The specific rules are going to do is if you are on doing a telephone solicitation using AI and you don't disclose to the consumer that it's not a live person, you can get in trouble for that.
Wow. So it's funny because one of my friends took on a marketing position with a company. I was really impressed. He does demos all the time on his Facebook account with this tool, which is an AI voice, and it is immaculately impressive. I mean, tonality, knowledge, context, understanding what you're saying. And but I think that AI-based salespeople, sales calls, or even in many ways customer support, I don't know. I think a lot of it loses a lot of its jazz if it's disclosed because I feel like the other side. I mean, how many times do I do a webinar and the only thing the attendees give a crap about is it live? And I'm like, what if it wasn't? And then they're like, I'll leave. I mean, the content is the freaking same. They don't care. They want to know if it's live. I will say though, Amazon created an AI type of chatbot long before AI was a thing, where it's like if you want a refund or you have an issue, like you select the product, you select your problem, and I loved it because it was instant. Like I don't have to wait around for a person. But disclosure is going to be huge. All right, so that's
But
it's
the
pretty
number one
active.
thing they're really hitting is that impersonation stuff. I mean, if you look at the press release in February of
Okay.
the FTC
So
gave,
like someone can call and think they're talking to me because I've trained the
right,
AI to sound like me, but they're not talking to me. Okay,
correct, yep.
got it. Um, all right, and then what about the privacy con? What was that all about? That I wanted to attend it, and then just stuff came in the way. But um,
Privacy has always been one of the, it's not even on the back burner. How you retain customer information and keep it private. I mean, you can look it up. There's big lawsuits by the FTC against Target and many large companies that allow for data breaches. So even at a small scale, and I just dealt with this with actually a medical practice that got, this was a crazy one. And so you got to be careful about this. There was actually an extortion one where some hacker had some software that got into it, and then they sent an extortion demand that said if they didn't pay X amount of dollars, they were going to release all of their data. This was a medical office, and if you're doing a medical offer or you have medical, understand that there's HIPAA laws, which is our federal privacy laws as it pertains to medical disclosure. So it's a big issue. And so this offshore company, out of Somalia or wherever, was trying to, extort. So if that happens, you immediately go to the Department of Justice and let them know and get that taken care of. But for the meantime, you got to worry about this data breach because it could be very confidential information. So like with Target, same thing, some sort of, I don't know if it was Chinese or whatever, broke into their privacy, their consumer data and got credit cards and everything else. And then what happens, because they found, the FTC did an investigation and found that they didn't have the right blocks and protections in place, they were loose with their control, they brought an action for the privacy protections of the consumer. So a couple of things that I see with the privacy stuff is, if you have not looked at your privacy policy in the last 2 years, there have been significant changes into the privacy laws, especially as it pertains to doing business in various states like California and Florida and New York. Those states have all passed privacy laws to protect specific provisions in their code to protect the use of and retention of consumer data. Plus, if you're a global marketer, which I have a lot of them are, and you're doing business in the EO, then you've got the GDPR, which is another protection for privacy rights on top of that. So first and foremost, you've got to have good disclosures on privacy, how you're using content and information, and how you're keeping it safe. And then you got to make sure it's there, because if you don't keep you don't have the correct protections in place, then if there is a data breach and they do an investigation, you haven't done enough, then it could be the FTC, it could be a state AG, it could be Visa and MasterCard. You could get TMF because of some sort of PCI compliance problem. So you got to make sure that you're following all line with this. So the privacy stuff's something that the FTC is always worried about. It's actually kind of catch-22 for us marketers, or for you marketers out there, and they'll tell you why. The reason is because you're trying to use the typicality of your experience and your claims, and then, FTC comes in and says, well, your client's experience is private, but then they want you to go and get the client's experience. And then the client says it's private, mind your own business. So it's kind of like one of those things where I always laugh at it because it's circular. They want you to get substantiation about typicality and everything else, like we've talked about in other podcasts. But then they have these privacy rules. But just know this, when it comes to the enforcement of these privacies from at least the FTC, I don't see it under companies that have, they're not as big as like a Target. You'll see it more in those big cases. Doesn't mean you shouldn't follow the rules. You should still make sure you got that in place. Where the biggest exposure is the states and class actions. Like I have gotten 2 demands for arbitration in the last 6 months for clients that didn't update their privacy policies based upon the new California laws. And these are non-consumers, just people that went to their website, saw that their privacy policy hadn't been updated with the new law, and then got demand for class action arbitration based upon that failure to update the privacy policies. And that's happened twice, because what they're doing is those law firms are waiting. They're having professional plaintiffs go through, look at websites, look at privacy statements. And if they're not updated correctly, then they're sending these demands for arbitration because they know you've lost. And their expectation is that they're not just going to go after this one consumer, but all of your consumers in California, New York, Florida, wherever the changes of the law applies, where you haven't updated the law. So privacy is a big issue. You need to make sure that you're staying on top of that as well.
So much to think about, which makes me think, I don't know if I've looked at my privacy policy in the last little bit of time. Yeah, we did, I think. Okay, got it. So good. Now I'm good. So call Greg, guys. Call Greg. So the privacy stuff, that was the other interesting thing that we felt. Remember I asked you about this once, where it was like, so for a couple of people in the industry that got hit hard by the FTC, they imposed the business opportunity law on them, which was, moving forward, if you want to continue to sell this information and this kind of stuff, you need to abide by the business opportunity laws. And the business opportunity rules dictate that you have to disclose all your customers and like all this stuff, right? It was like really weird. And I came back to you and I was like, well, but if I do that, and by the way, I don't have that on me, so thank God. So it was just me asking about it. But it was like, if I do that, then wouldn't we be violating privacy policy stuff? And it was like, yep. I'm like, wait, so one way or the other, you're screwed. And it was like, that's the pit. They send you to pit.
You have to get their disclosure up front. And so that's part of when you're a biz op. So business opportunity, there are 25 states in the United States that have their own what are called business opportunity laws, or SAMP Act, seller assisted marketing plans. So it's something in addition to the federal government, which has the federal FTC has a business opportunity rule as well. They're based on different principles, but the same. It's basically, if you're offering any type of business to a consumer that hasn't already in that business, that you need to you have to register and give proper disclosures before they signed up. So with a true biz op, you have registration and disclosure. It's like a mini PPM or stock security prospectus. It's showing people what the risks and what the benefits of this type of business are in advance. And in that case, Onik, what they would do is get consents up front to be able to collect that information to share it in the future. So you could do it. You just couldn't do it tomorrow because you'd have no data. So it would take time for you to build up that, database of information before you could properly disclose to somebody like, hey, this is the common experience, or these are how, the privacy. So you'd have to build that up. You couldn't day one go back to all your old clients and say, hey, you're in this, because they didn't sign the releases or disclosures. They never got the disclosure document. And so
Got it.
and the crux of this is some states, California, it's 10 days prior. No, California is. I think California is like 5 days prior, but Utah's 10 days prior. They have to get the disclosure document 10 days before you can take money from it. And so you just have to sit on, can you imagine just sitting on the cell for 10 days, 5 days?
No, that's it. It's kiss of death. It's kiss of death.
It's
Wouldn't work. Yeah, it wouldn't work.
Yeah.
Cool. Any other? I mean, we're winding down to the end of this episode. I wanted to do kind of a briefing, and for everyone who's watching, by the way, Greg and I talked about this before this episode. We want to bring some guests on. So one of the things that we plan on doing in this on this podcast is bringing guests, not just those who've been hit by the FTC, but maybe some of the other organizations, state AGs, and other ones. So that is coming in the future. But yeah, Greg, anything else that's happened in the last few weeks that you feel like people should know about?
Yeah, I mean, there's always things that are happening. I'm watching the different cases. I mean, that Automators LLC case came down with a $23 million settlement last week. And, that's an automated Amazon store making earnings claims through a chart and representation. So you just got to be aware. Like, these are all, and that was a telemarketing case as well.
I do want to discuss this real quick. So this is off topic. It has nothing to do with the podcast episode today, but do they have what's with Amazon and them going after companies selling Amazon opportunities while they're also suing Amazon? So I would have thought, oh, they're in bed with Amazon, and Amazon's like, hey, get rid of these people that use our name and brand badly. And so they're like deploying the power of the federal government to go after these, but they're not, because they're suing Amazon right now too. So it's not.
Let's talk about the differences in the Amazon case from the Automators LLC case, right?
Yeah.
FTC has sued Amazon because they believe that their rules have hurt competition on the platform. That there are some things they've implemented that hurt global competition. That there is some sort of perception that a big name like maybe you've got a big firm like Bed Bath & Beyond or something that's selling products on Amazon gets better treatment.
I didn't mean that. Sorry, look, didn't mean to cut you off. I didn't mean that. I just meant that they're obviously not in like bed with Amazon, since they're having their own contentious, albeit a separate issue. But why is it that they seem to have, like, even in my case, they were really, really about the mug offer, right? Which was teaching people how to sell mugs, custom mugs on Amazon or Etsy. They have like this issue with like physical products, businesses. Not saying they don't with other ones, but it definitely is a resounding, revolving, like recurrent trend. And I'm just curious why. Like, what's up with that subject matter?
There's rampant fraud and misrepresentations when it comes to an automated type Amazon or Walmart or Facebook store. And I see it across the board. There are several. I think there was a slew of people that got into the industry at the same time to sell those products, and they all failed. And so you've got tens of thousands of customers across the United States who have paid anywhere. And these were not small failures, because these automated stores are going anywhere from $20,000 to $50,000 a piece. And so you got mom and paws, like, I'm dealing with one right now here in Utah. I'm bringing the action. I'm flip the script, because I've got people that have been harmed with this. And you look at it and you can see that they were lied from the beginning. They were given pro formas about schedules, and that nobody made money. They took the $40,000 to $50,000 each, and nobody made money. It's a clear fraud. And that's one group of people that, I represent 120 different individuals that were harmed, and it's not the entire class. So if you take that one company and you times that by 100, there are thousands and thousands of customers across the United States that invested over the last few years into an automated Amazon or Walmart or Facebook store that lost all of their money because they never. And so that FTC's hearing that, and they're coming in. That's why when I talk to a client that's offering one of those, that's the offer, and it's a true automated, I'm always like, man, you guys got to know this is like one of the top type of products to offer that is out there risk wise. Like 1 to 10, you're an 8 or above just because of the product.
Yeah. No, and it makes sense because most of these also cost 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 80 grand. So you're just
Right.
playing with a lot bigger amount.
Yeah.
And I know for a fact that some of them will even pitch you to pull from your retirement accounts or pull equity out of your home. And
Oh,
it's just really, really dirty stuff.
my case, they got him to do home equity lines, IRA distributions, pension plan distributions. They preferred not credit cards, so they couldn't do chargebacks. So that once the wire was out, like I'm
Yeah, it's
sure
bad.
I'm seeing it on a small level. The FTC seeing, I know globally they're seeing it all over the place, and it's a hot
Yeah.
button for them right
Yeah.
now.
Okay. Got it. All right. Well, listen, that brings us to the end of the episode today. Guys, that's a current update. So if you're doing B2B, watch out. That was the biggest thing there. And if you're thinking about using AI to make sales calls, support calls, there are changes right around the corner. But basically, at this point, it's safe to assume that if there's an AI talking to someone, disclose that it's happening. Even if it's a chat bot, if it's a live call or whatever, because even if the rule's not quite set yet, it's coming. I just know it is. You can kind of predict at this point the way things go. So having said that, remember, you can grab our free marketing assessment if you want. Quite a few of you have taken us up on that. Go below right there, naoac.com/audit in the YouTube video. It's the first link in the description. Otherwise, if you're listening, naoac.com/audit. And of course, don't say that. The book will be out. The moment, Greg doesn't know this yet, but we did finish. I was messaging him earlier. We finished the manuscript, so it's off to the editor. Then it's going to go straight for formatting and printing and all that jazz. I am picking the date of April 16th. I think that will be our day of going live. I will officially announce it in a few. But please get on the alert list. Don'tSayThat.com. Go over there, get on the alert list, grab the book when it comes out. We will have an academy behind it for compliant marketing. Grab that as well. Tell other people about it. And of course, if we can do an assessment for you, marketing assessment, do naoac.com/audit. Greg, thank you very much. Oh, and by the way, guys, guardianlaw.com. If in case there's anything Greg's firm can do for you, it's the only firm I recommend for all your compliance needs, especially. All right. With that said, as I always say, when life pushes you, stand straight, smile, push it the heck back. See you guys on the next episode. Bye.